Michelle has a passion and drive for working with challenging students, also known as her starfish, and celebrating their amazing accomplishments. Michelle also has two children, John Michael, who is a student at Texas Tech, and Caitlin, who is a student at Rockwall High School. In her free time, Michelle loves to shop and spend time with her children and family. Michelle, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you. Oh, also, if you have questions, just put them in the chat and we will answer them during the session.
Okay, great. Thank you, Christy. Thank you, Ashley. I want to thank y'all for having me here tonight. Hopefully, I don't know everything. If y'all pick up just a few things today, hopefully that will help you just in your interactions with your kids, because I know I'm right there with y'all. I have kids of my own. Okay, Christy, this was doing just. And now it's not letting me. There we go. Okay. I don't know what happened there. Okay, sorry about that. I'm going to back up a little bit. So I just want to start out. Oh, and I need to make sure I've shared my sound. I am so sorry. I have not done this in a minute. Hold on. Share sound. Okay, so you guys let me know if for some reason you don't hear this, because I did hit the share sound.
Restorative practices, to me, in my experience here, has been getting closer to the student, getting closer to forming a closer relationship, understanding what's really going on.
When you consciously work to adapt a restorative philosophy in your own home, ultimately, you're going to improve your relationship with your kids. Every single body that walks into a school needs to understand the restorative practice. And parents are pivotal to that, because that's who children are most likely spending the majority of their time with. And so the message needs to be consistent. If a student is in a restorative classroom and they go home and they're getting a different kind of messaging from their parents, it makes it very confusing. There's a lack of consistency, and there's a lack of buy-in to the process of restorative work. When we're working toward establishing relationship and respect, every person who has contact with that student needs to be on the same page. If your teacher is acting in a certain way in their classroom, where they're trying to treat their children with respect and establish relationship, that being echoed at home is only going to make the child more successful in their school career.
We're all on the same page. We are working together. We understand what's going on, and it definitely reinforces it. If there's consistency and cooperation and communication between school and home, then I think the chances of success and changing the behavior through consistency are going to be much, much higher.
If I could get parents to really hear the heart that we want a lasting change in your child, we don't want to punish your child, because guess what? Your child is probably going to make another mistake, probably even before they leave this room, you know what I mean? I think that if we can speak to that part of them, they'll understand why their presence, their buy-in, and their understanding is so important. And I think this process is a way of telling the parent and showing the parent and demonstrating to the parent, I honor what you have trusted me with, and let's work together to make this the most powerful, impactful human being that they can be.
I really felt like they were my co-parent during the day. They had established a relationship with the child, and for that reason, she liked them. She listened to them. When they gave her guidance, she was willing to go along and correct her behavior.
Okay, so that's just kind of just basically the tip of the iceberg. And I'm probably going to have trouble. I always have trouble doing this. I'm so sorry. Hang on. Let me just go this way. Let me back up for just a second. I'm so sorry. We're going to get it. So what we're going to look about, the things that we want to think about with those restorative practices, the first thing is that it's about relationships. And I think a lot of times teachers and especially parents, if they don't have a clear understanding of what restorative practices is, they might think, well, kids can just do whatever they want. They can get away with whatever they want, and there's no consequences. And I think that's probably one of the biggest obstacles I face in training teachers and working with teachers on restorative practices is that there's no consequences. And just to assure everyone, that could not be further from the truth. There are definitely consequences. The difference is because of that relationship piece, because teachers have that relationship with your students, because you have the relationships you do with your own kids, you know what consequences work for them, hopefully. So for instance, a lot of times teachers will, as a first line of action, they might call a parent to visit with them about some issues that are going on. And some kiddos are like, oh my gosh, no, to call my parents. And that's not something they want to happen. Whereas other kids, if you call their parents, it's no big deal. So again, I think the key is finding what consequences are meaningful. And so meaningful consequences, having that relationship piece. And one of the other really, really important pieces of restorative practices is helping our children make right what they did wrong. So you don't come at it as such a punitive angle. I think a lot of times as parents and as teachers, it's frustrating, it's draining, it's exhausting. The most difficult thing I think I deal with personally is just being consistent with my own kids and following through when I do say things, because you can't have those empty promises. You have to follow through. But along with that, some of the outcomes that your schools and your campuses are working towards is just having the positive relationships with parents, with community leaders, with everybody else, so that we're all on the same page and we're all working together. And not so much worried about what punishment are we going to get, but again, how can we make our kiddos make right what they did wrong and understand the ramifications, the impact that they have on everyone else around them by what they say, but what they do. I have a 16-year-old daughter. She rolls her eyes. She doesn't understand that when she rolls her eyes and when she talks to me in a certain tone, how that affects me. So part of my job as her parent is to help her understand, hey, Caitlin, when you talk this way, this is how it impacts everybody else. So just seeing from a different point of view. And I'm curious what, I know we have it could be anybody, but I'm just curious if we could find out the majority of parents, it might be helpful to know what grade level their kids are, just so, because I know since it's a smaller group, maybe I can tailor this a little bit more directly towards their age kids as well. So I don't know if they could just put that in the chat and find out. That might be helpful if y'all could help me out with that. So we want everybody to play a part in this. So what is restorative practices? Again, it's just that relational approach, addressing student behavior so that we're more focused on helping our students, helping our kiddos be accountable. We're more worried about, we're more concerned with them making the connection with consequences and accountability than we are with just punish. Because I think back when I was growing up, we just did what the adults said because that's how we were raised, and we didn't do a lot of questioning. I think a lot has changed with our kids. It's not necessarily bad, but I think technology has played a huge role in all of that. So COVID has played a role in all of that. We had the world basically shut down for a chunk of time. Kids did not know how to interact with other kids. So they start relying on technology, and it makes it really tough when they get out in the real world to interact. So part of that is just being consistent and helping them find that accountability for their choices, both positive and not so positive. What restorative practice isn't, unfortunately, it's not a quick fix. It's not a one size fits all. It's not a silver bullet. It's not something that you can just implement in your school or in your home and it's going to just fix everything. I think a lot of us will find that change takes time, and our students, our kids, our children did not get the way they are overnight. And so it's going to take a little time to make those meaningful changes. So don't look at this as the next quick fix, everything's going to be peaceful and great, because what my experience has been with my own kids and the kids I work with in school is when you implement any change, it's going to get better before it gets worse, because they're going to test you, they're going to buck the system. So just knowing and being aware that it's going to get harder before it gets easier, but then you can get over that hump. So some of the things that restorative practices addresses, it addresses and discusses the needs of the school community, how to resolve conflict. And I think, again, that's how technology has really robbed some of our kids as far as those social interactions, those in-person communications, those conflict resolution pieces that I think they missed a big chunk of. Again, repairing the harm and restoring those relationships. We want to reduce, prevent, and improve harmful behavior. And then, of course, one of the most important is just to build those healthy relationships between teachers, students, and parents, and the community as a whole. So it's a shift. Like I said, I'm a little bit older. I grew up in a little bit different time. So back when I was growing up, when I think of school discipline, and when I even think of discipline in my own home, I mean, it was just, you broke this rule and this is your consequence. Take your, you can do one of two things, but you broke a rule, you're going to have a punishment, so to speak. We use that word punishment a whole lot more, I think, than we do now. So that traditional, what we looked at in the past and traditionally is school rules were violated. So now the shift with restorative is, instead of thinking rules were violated, we're going to think more in terms of some of the relationships were violated. How did I harm these people? What are some things I did? We're not worried about establishing guilt. Again, we're looking at accountability, obligations, things that we want to help instill in our kiddos to help them come away and be more responsible and accountable for all of their actions. We're not just concentrating on the one who offended. So for instance, if your child came in and said something that hurt another one of your child's feelings, we're not just going to focus on the child who said the ugly things. We're going to give the child who was called a name or something happened to them a voice as well. So everybody plays a role in that whole process. Again, it just continues to focus on responsible for harmful behavior, and we want to give them the opportunity to make it right. I think a lot of times, I know I do as a parent, I'm real quick to jump to a consequence instead of giving them the opportunity to make it right. So giving them the opportunity to make it right plays a big role in all of this. The 5 guiding principles of restorative practices are relationships, respect, responsibility, restoration, and then finally reintegration. A lot of what I'm going to talk about tonight is more directed at how you can implement this in your home as a parent, but obviously it's going to be the very best when parents, teachers, everyone as a whole is working together and we're all on the same page. So all of these pieces are really important. The goals, again, I've said this a couple of times, accountability. So your kiddos have the opportunity to be accountable for the harm that they caused and the opportunity to repair that damage. They resolve to seek that, to help with the conflict, to resolve that conflict, and then just maintain an environment where the work of where the school can do what it needs to do. And another piece of it is just developing those skills that for whatever reason they've lost or they haven't mastered yet. So a lot of the social emotional skills, a lot of the interaction, all of those things, we're working to help our kiddos improve in that as well. So we want to be proactive and not reactive. And I know that's really, really tough sometimes because our kids come to us with all these issues and all these concerns. And sometimes we jump, and I know I do too. I react instead of thinking things through and being calm and being proactive in my approach. What I'm going to talk about next, this is called the respect agreement. And I have really helped teachers facilitate this in their classrooms, but I see this as a piece that you could facilitate in your home as well. So we're going to talk a little bit about the respect agreement and then affective statements. So what is a respect agreement? A respect agreement is basically just a social contract between you and your child. And the important piece is everyone plays a role, everyone has a voice. So you sit down, and I have my teachers sit down in the classroom and I have them ask, there's 4 quadrants. What does it look like when the teacher's respecting the student? Or what does it look like when the parent's respecting the child? What does it look like when the child's respecting the parent? What does it look like when we're respecting each other? The last piece of that could also play a role in your household, because it is in the classroom is how do you treat your materials, your things in your classroom. So that could kind of be a little bit changed to, well, do they have any chores around the house? How do they treat everything at home? Do they have responsibilities, and what is their role in carrying out those responsibilities? So I see this as like a family meeting type thing. I would take as much time as you need, but sit down as a family, talk about, I would start with your kids. Hey, because I found when you start with the kids first and you have them tell you where you can improve, they become a little bit more open to it. So ask your kiddos, hey, what are some things you see that you need from me? Have them brainstorm, have them all write that out. And then you're going to maybe let your children know what are some things you expect out of them. Expectations is a lot different than rules. And that's why I like this respect agreement, because we're setting a guideline for expectations that we have for one another in our home. We're going to hold each other accountable. We understand that we can make mistakes, but that's okay. We can get through that. We can learn. And the thing about that respect agreement, anybody can ask for it at any time to be changed, to be revised. It's not set in stone, because we can't possibly address every single thing that might happen. Things always pop up. So everybody in the family has the understanding, hey, if something happens, I can call another meeting. We can come back and we can make some revisions. The other piece that I have kids do, and I think it's really important, is to sign it. And the part of that I like is by signing this agreement, everybody signs it. You can talk to your kids about what the importance of a signature is, what it really means. It's not just haphazard. It's not just without thinking. They need to take that very seriously, because as they grow up in life, they're going to sign job contracts. They may have to sign paperwork to purchase a home, to purchase a car. So really helping them understand the importance of that signature and what it really means. It doesn't mean you're going to be perfect, but it means that you're going to try your best to hold your end of the commitment. The other thing it does is just, whoops, sorry, I apologize. I am not always real good with this. Okay. Promotes, and the thing is, you want to develop that common language in your home. So much like I tell my teachers, we think our kids should know, and we tell them 100 times a day, I know. But the example I use with the teachers at the very first of the year, they're really good about reminding kids of what the expectations are and going over that. But it's like after the first couple of weeks, it kind of goes by the wayside. And teachers sometimes get the attitude, well, I told them 2 weeks ago, they should know this. They should know it, but you know what? They don't. And I ask the teachers always, without fail, I'll ask them, do you remember when y'all got together in August and had your professional development? And it's March now. Can you tell me everything y'all talked about? Nobody can do that. Our kids can't do that. We shouldn't expect them to do that. So that common language that you develop with your children in your home, hey, you know what? You're going to go out tonight. Can you remind me what's expected out of you? Can you remind me what time I need you to be home? How I need you to contact me? Laying out all those expectations. The same thing with chores. Hey, can you remember that before you leave to go watch that movie tonight, these are the expectations I have out of you. So it can't be a one and done. It has to be a constant language, a constant flow in your house all the time. I think that respect piece is a little bit different. And then as parents, our kids need to respect us as their parent. That's a non-negotiable. And drawing those boundaries, I think I myself have been guilty of wanting to be too easy on my kids and not wanting to let them. It's tough to see your kids struggle. I know firsthand, I've seen both of my kids struggle through some things, and I had to take a step back and let them just struggle. And that's hard for us to do. And so sometimes we may tend to be easier on them, or we may tend to try and figure everything out for them to shelter them from that. But just know that's not the best place for them. So they need to learn that accountability. They need to learn, if I do this, this is the consequence that will follow. So it just provides that whole framework for you as a family. And I would, as you can see, there are, after you fill that out, I would post that in a place for your family. So here's some examples of that. So it's the expectations. You can see the quadrants. Seriously, you could do this with your family. Have the same thing. Get a whiteboard. Have those up there. Maybe have those family meetings, however often you know it, once a week maybe, and just go back and revisit it. But I really do like that respect agreement. I think it's very valuable as a parent and as an educator. And if you're doing it at home and they're doing it at school, man, it just really complements each other. Okay, affected. Are we doing good? Do we have any questions or anything, Christy, Ashley?
Nope, not yet.
Okay, I'll be real transparent. Zooms are tough for me because when I can't see faces, I feel like I'm just talking. So if anybody has any questions, y'all please just pop in and feel free to do that.
Hey, here's the other thing. If they have questions, if they'll put it in the Q&A instead of the chat, the district set up our portal for this evening and the chat was disabled and we didn't know that. So if you guys will put it in the Q&A, that would be awesome. And we'll help you out there.
Yeah, in any way I can help and follow up, I'm happy to do that. Affective statements. These are, they're game changers. They change everything. So with those affective statements, it's going to do a couple of things. It's going to make your kids aware of the impact of their behavior on everyone else. Like I said, I don't know what age y'all are dealing with. My children are 16 and 21. So I've kind of gone through a whole pretty much everything, especially with my son. But it does, like I cannot emphasize enough how, in my experience, kids do not understand the impact of their behavior on other people. They're not doing it on purpose. My daughter, I'll give every time, she always just has a really agitated face. And I'll say, are you upset? No, but now you're making me mad. So I will have to take her aside and explain to her, Caitlin, when you have those faces and when you have those tones, that's how it impacts everybody else. I don't think they do it necessarily to be difficult. They just don't understand. And we've got to remember they don't know what they don't know. And our brains are not fully developed in males till they're 25 to 27 years old. Females were a little bit quicker, but not much. So there's really a lot of development. There's really a whole lot of things going on. And when they say they don't know, a lot of times we've got to remember they don't know. The other thing those affective statements do is give you an exact description of what the behavior was and how it impacted them, so they can make those connections and hopefully tie the choices with the consequences. You've got to deliver it in the right time frame, the right manner. Timing is everything, I have found. So finding the right time sometimes is half the battle. And you want to deliver that directly to them. And again, we've got to remember to separate the behavior from the person, because our children's behavior does not define them as a person. Thank goodness my behavior doesn't define me as a person, because we make a lot of mistakes sometimes. So I think that's a big part of it too. Learning to separate their behavior from their value. And that can be really tough when we're in some really frustrating situations. But then you're modeling to them skills that they can take with them for the rest of their life. So some examples. You want to use those I statements, because when you use the you statements, it puts our kids on the defensive. Well, you do this, you said this. So if you say, I'm really proud when you come home and you've done all your homework, or I'm really disappointed when I found out that you cheated on that test. So just putting, again, that helps them make the connections between their behaviors, their choices, and how it affects us as parents. So trying to really use those I statements is really, really important. And the thing is, it's not natural, because we don't usually go around saying, you know what, I'm really upset that you came home late, and that makes me feel really angry. And so we don't do that. I feel blank because, you know what, I feel really upset because you came home late. I'd rather you come here on time or call me. We don't do that. We usually, a lot of times, will be really quick to jump the gun, and instead of taking a moment and taking a breath and letting them just really understand the connection between what they said, what they did, and how it impacts everybody else. I skipped over that. Okay, well, I'm going to just keep going. So the goals, again, you don't want to use you statements, because you don't want to escalate the conflict. When you use those I statements, it tends to de-escalate that conflict. We can identify the feelings and help resolve that conflict to hopefully prevent future conflicts, at least with that area. Empathy is also another huge, huge thing that I think we could really do a better job, I know myself included, of instilling into our kids. I think, again, COVID did a number. It's really tough. But teaching empathy to our kids, how to put themselves in someone else's shoes, how to really identify those true feelings, expanding their vocabulary, especially emotionally, socially, so that they can really identify what's going on. They can really put themselves in someone else's shoes. So sorry, this keeps skipping around, and I apologize, but I've got to go back. So empathetic listening, that's another really important piece. So a lot of times I think we get busy, we get rushed. We don't really take the time to listen completely. I know if you're like me, my technology gets in the way of a lot. My daughter checked me one time. My son played baseball, he played basketball, he played football, he played everything. But inevitably, I'd be in the stands and my daughter would say, Mama, put your phone down. JM's up to bat. Mama, put your phone down. He went out on the court. Because I'm so distracted that I'm not listening completely. I do a classroom management training, and in that there's a survey of 15-year-old kids, and it asks them, what's the one thing that your teacher does that means the most to you? And I think it'd probably be the same with parents. And the number one thing was listen. Just listen. I think our kids are really missing that piece. And I know I'm guilty. I get busy, and it's hard to talk to a 16-year-old who's really upset and agitated, or a 2-year-old or a 4-year-old. It's hard. But just taking the time to let them know that they're heard, putting all of this junk away and truly looking them face to face and just listening to what's going on. The other strategy is to listen from all perspectives. We need to remember that our children's perception is their reality. Even if it's skewed, even if it's way off base, if that perception is that you're mad at them because they came in, they did, that's the reality. It may be something else completely going on. But if they perceive that you're disappointed in them or that you're upset with them, that's the reality. So we really need to listen for what the underlying messages are, what they're saying. I know when I'm engaged in conversation, 9 times out of 10, I'm not truly listening. I'm thinking about, what am I going to say next? And how many of us as parents just get so sidetracked and so busy that we're thinking about, what are we going to say next? What do we need to tell them instead of what do we need to listen to? So listen from all perspectives, repeat and paraphrase. Man, I heard you saying that you're really frustrated because you've had so much homework and you feel like you are too overloaded with homework and chores and everything else going on. So you just need a day to just decompress. Is that what you're saying? And they may say, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Or they may tell you, you are completely off base. So that is the importance of repeating and paraphrasing so that we can be on the same page and get a really clear understanding of what's going on. So we're going to talk about different parenting styles. And when I do this with the teachers, it's the same thing. So you have to have a really, really good balance. So what this window describes that you see on the right side is the different parenting styles. So on the bottom is support. So the bottom is support. So how supportive are you? And then the expectations. What is your parenting style? So if you'll look at the top left, the authoritarian parent, they're high on firmness and low on fairness. So they're really firm, they're really strict, but your kids don't perceive you as always being fair. The permissive, which is on the bottom right. So those are the two extremes. Permissive, low on firmness and high on fairness. So that permissive parent might be the one that kind of just sits back and doesn't say a whole lot, maybe doesn't want to rock the boat. So they'll be really fair, but it's hard for them to be firm. So that would be the parent that doesn't have very structured expectations, doesn't offer a lot of consistency or structure in the home, maybe lets kids kind of run over them just a little bit. That's my experience in the classroom. That authoritarian, it's you did it because you're going to do it because I told you to. That's that. And that's going back to that authoritarian, that's the type of parenting that used to work for a lot of kids, but it doesn't necessarily work anymore. So the goal is to find a good balance. So if you look at the other boxes, the uninvolved on the bottom left, they're neglectful. So basic needs maybe aren't being met. Kids can do whatever they want. You don't want the uninvolved. The authoritative is the sweet spot. So that's where we have the balance between expectations, fairness. There's a lot of structure. There's a lot of nurturing. There's a lot of shared conversations. It's just everybody, there's an equal respect, a mutual respect. So just finding the balance sometimes I know is really, really hard. And I think if we think about it, every one of us as parents, that's the thing. You're not just in one square all the time. You move around a whole lot. And some days you may be more punitive. Some days you may be more permissive. So just understanding that you can land in any of these areas at any time, but your goal is to be that restorative parent, which is also the authoritative parent. And that's the goal for your teachers in the classroom as well. So just having that in mind. So what are some things you can strengthen and build your family and build your trust? Just some of these things I've already talked about. Just having some clear practices, making sure your kids know what you expect from them. Again, I know I keep using my kids, but that's the only example I have. When my daughter was a lot younger, I'd be like, okay, go upstairs, take your clothes out. You need to put away all your books, your backpack, I'd give her this long list. And one day she looked at me and she's like, Mama, I can't remember all of that. Tell me one thing at a time. So again, just slowing down, making sure they clearly understand what you expect out of them. For some of our kids, we may have to write out what that looks like. So these are the steps for taking out the trash. These are the steps for what you need to do. You brush your teeth. So really writing it out clearly so they can see what's really expected out of them and there's no questions. And then review that, go back to that often, revisit it, know that there's room to always change and get that better. Charts, I don't know how many of y'all do charts for your kiddos. Again, I know that probably I see that with the younger kids. I don't think we do that with our older kids quite as much, but for our little ones who are learning, man, they do so well with those charts and those positive reinforcement systems. So having them earn some of those privileges, having them earn the screen time or staying up late or going over to a friend's house. You know, if you do so many chores, you get so many stars, and that teaches them that the currency that teaches them you do this, you get this. Again, connecting the choices and the consequences. Just having time as a family. I know I'm so guilty. I can't remember the last time we sat down together to eat as a family. I think people get so busy and they have so many activities going on. It's really, really tough. But just having those specific times just to come together as a family. Even if that's going out to eat, because I know as my family, my kids were very involved in sports. We didn't often have a lot of time, but man, don't feel guilty. If that means going out to Chick-fil-A and just sitting together as a family, use that time. Don't get have them. Chick-fil-A used to have a thing where you put everything. I don't know if y'all heard about this. You put all your phones in a box. You do that and you get an ice cream cone. I don't think they do that anywhere anymore, but just hey, everybody give me your phone. And we're going to take this time to sit down together, even if it's just 15 minutes. Checking in with your kids on a regular basis, communicating with them on a regular basis, having times, set times where they need to come, curfews, when they need to come in, when they need to check with you. Maybe they need to just text you to let you know that they're doing okay. So those check-in, check-out things. And that's where we can develop that trust too. I mean, with my son, I gave him a lot of leeway. And my mantra was, I'm going to trust you until you give me a reason not to. He's 21. He never gave me a reason not to trust him. So he had a lot of freedom, but that came with him earning it through his actions and through his behaviors. Some other things you need to do is just empower with those enforceable statements. So explain. A lot of times we tell our kids, do it because I said so. And if they ask us a question, sometimes we take that in the wrong way, that they're questioning us. There's a big difference between questioning and asking a question. And it's okay to explain to our kids why we're doing this or why this is expected out of them. Sometimes it's okay to let them know. Not all the time, but sometimes letting them know, we're doing this. You have to come in at this time I want you to be safe. So set those firm, clear, well-defined expectations. Don't give them a bunch of empty threats or a bunch of chances, because that breaks the trust with you and your child. So setting those clear boundaries and following through in a compassionate, respectful, caring way. Redirecting them. Sometimes that takes just a look or just a gentle reminder, but redirecting them, collaborating, helping them know that you're all in this together and that you are teaching them empathy, you're teaching them some skills that they're going to take for the rest of their lives. Natural and logical consequences. I don't know if y'all are familiar with Love and Logic. Did y'all do any of that on your campuses? Kind of the same thing. So again, just like what I've been saying, love and logic, there's natural consequences to what you do, what you say, what you don't do. So you know what? If you choose not to do the dishes tonight, that's okay. But until you do those dishes, you're not going to be able to leave. I've found also telling them what we want them to do instead of what we don't want them to do is very helpful as well. I think sometimes we get caught up and give them a whole list of do nots when we could flip that a little bit more and tell them our expectations in a clear, well-defined, respectful way, and really making that clear for everyone. Logical, reasonable. You're not going to punish your kiddo forever for a month. That's probably not reasonable. So again, logical, reasonable. You know what? If you don't do your homework, that's the grade you're going to get. If you don't go to practice, you're not going to get as much playtime. Restorative circles is another one. You could do this again as a family meeting. So if there has been something that has happened in your family, talking about what rule was broken, who broke the rule, what consequence should they have? So those are the things that we used to ask. Who broke the rule? How should they be punished? And I don't know about y'all, but if I ask my kids or my students, why did you do that? What are they going to say 9 times out of 10? I don't know. I don't know why I did it. Because guess what? Again, it's about that brain development. They really don't know a lot of times. So instead of asking them, why did you do that? We're going to get to these questions in just a minute, but what happened? What were you thinking about at the time? What have you thought about since? Who do you think this has affected? And how can you make it right? Because if we're not instilling in our kiddos how they can make right what we did wrong, we're really missing a whole lot. So moving to those restorative questions, they focus on the behavior. Again, separating our kids from the behavior does not define them. This focuses on the behavior, not the child. We're going to respect everybody. We're going to find solutions, and we're going to understand the harm caused and then help them solve their problems. We're not going to solve all the problems for them, but we're going to show and guide them some ways that they can do that. And I think it's most important, and we do that when they're still in the safety net of our house, because here's the thing. If we're not helping them learn to solve their problems and figure some things out on their own, when they get out and they go to college or they graduate from high school, they're not going to know what to do. When we can let them have the safety net of our home to figure a few things out, to struggle, to fail, to come back and resolve it, that's when our kids can really grow and be more successful. So these questions, once again, what happened? What were you thinking about at the time? What have your thoughts been since? Who has been affected and in what way? And what do you think you need to do to make things right? So if you have an issue with one of your kiddos, these are some questions, some really deep digging questions you could be asking them to kind of drill down and get to what's really going on. So the other piece of this that I like is we don't just talk to the child who the offender, but we talk to the one who was offended in the presence of the offender, so they can, again, draw conclusions and figure out how what they did or said affected and impacted everybody else around them. So what did you think when you realized what had happened? What have your thoughts been since? Who has been affected? How has this affected you and others? I love this one. What's been the hardest thing for you? That can be really powerful for somebody to hear. Man, what was the hardest thing when I called you this name or when I did this to you? This is what was hard for that one who it was done to. And then the one who was offended, what do they feel you needs to happen to make things right? That's a really big piece of digging down and figuring out what's really going on. So just some behaviors that we can exhibit as parents: listening, empathizing. I'm not going to read this whole exhaustive list, but I think some of the most important ones are setting those boundaries, explaining your actions, humor. If you don't have a sense of humor and you take everything so seriously, it's going to be tough. So having a sense of humor, not taking everything so seriously, being real, being vulnerable. For some of our kids, we're the first person they see handle feelings of anger, frustration, disappointment appropriately. And we're the model, we're the example. So showing them how to handle those difficult situations in a really real, authentic, honest way. Not being afraid to apologize to them when we do wrong. That's kind of hard sometimes. But there's a lot of kids I work with in schools who have never had an adult apologize to them. It's really impactful when they hear, hey, I messed up, I'm not perfect. Being consistent, forgiving them, and just allowing them to learn and grow within some boundaries and within some parameters is what that restorative piece is all about. Also understanding that a lot of what we see with our kids is just the very, very surface, and there's a whole lot more going on. And maybe they don't feel comfortable coming to us and talking to us about everything. But if they can find that trusted adult, that person that can really be there for them and really listen to them. Because a lot of things manifest, and it's not the way. Anger, when someone is hurt, a lot of times that manifests as lashing out in anger. So just understanding that what you're seeing a lot of times is just the very little bit of what's really, really going on. Changing your mindset is a big, big part of it too. Understanding that it's our job as parents to instill a lot of the social emotional skills in our kiddos and really focusing in on the things that they do right. I know it gets frustrating if some of us are dealing with some really, really challenging kiddos at home. It seems like you're just spinning your wheels. But when you stop and pause and really focus on the good things they're doing, it changes the whole climate of your home. It changes over time. It takes a little bit of time, but over time it changes everything. I think a lot of times kids feel a lot of pressure and a lot of stress. So just having your home be that safe haven for them to have an outlet to really work and problem solve and deal with some of the things that are happening in their lives is a big piece of that. I don't have anything else. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to take some questions. I went through that a little quickly. It's just hard when I don't have that other side sometimes. Any questions?
Michelle, I'm not seeing any in the queue.
Okay.
Sorry, they were vacuuming.
Okay. Did y'all have anything else that you?
I think we're good. And just so everyone knows, we are recording this, so we will share it with you and then anybody else that didn't get to attend. So I don't see, I'm looking here, I don't see any other questions.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's, give it another minute. Oh, wait, hang on. I think there is a question now. I have a 13-year-old daughter. I'm challenging situations. She answers with sarcasm. Not exactly sure that. I have a 13-year-old daughter. I'm challenging situations. She answers with sarcasm. I think she's asking how to handle that when she answers sarcastically. That's what it looks like.
I mean, I think the best part is just helping her. And like I said, with my own daughter, when she answers me in that tone, as calmly as you can, saying, when you answer that way, this is how it affects me. And really helping them make that connection that you're not wanting to engage in the power struggle, but that you really have to understand when you talk to me in the sarcastic tone, this is how it makes me feel.
Right. I'm just giving them a minute.
Okay, that's fine.
Just a second to see. Okay, I have another one. As a single parent, I find it really tough to be the good and bad cop. How to work with my 13-year-old.
There's a lot of 13-year-olds on here, isn't there? It's hard being the good and bad cop, but here's the thing. It's not the good and the bad cop, because there's not really you've got to change your mindset that you're not being bad. You are helping your child. The more boundaries and the more consistency you can give them, that's the best thing you can do for them. So establishing, I think part of it also is explaining to them why they received the consequence they did, or why you're going to have to do that. I think sometimes kids just don't have an understanding of why these expectations are in place, and so they rebel. But when you can sit down and calmly explain to them, when everybody's in a better frame of mind, not in the heat of the moment, and just coming to some mutual understanding with them. But it's tough being a single parent. I know. I've done it too.
We do the best we can, right?
We do, and here's the deal. We do the best we can with what we have, with the resources we have at the time.
Mhm.
And you can't kick yourself for that. I mean, I've got to believe that, everybody cares about their kids. If you didn't care about your kids, you wouldn't take the time.
Exactly.
So everybody does the best we can. And I think what we could do as a school community, and this is talking as a school community, I think a lot of times parents, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think when your kiddos are in trouble and all of the parents here are all the negative things going on, it's hard for them to have a good attitude sometimes. So I think that comes back to us as the school and as the teachers of doing a better job of communicating all the good things and the good notes home, so that it doesn't put all that on the parents, because it's hard on the parent side when all they're getting are the negative calls and they don't get any positive calls, because there's a lot of good things every kid does, and just helping as the school recognizing that as teachers too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I don't see any more questions out here. If anybody has any other questions, go ahead and put them out there. We'll give it another minute or so. Great questions. Well, Michelle, I really appreciate you taking the time. It really does hit on a lot of, different points as parents. I mean, I feel like we all probably go through the very same things and can really relate to the things you were talking about, and just hearing somebody else talk about it helps and can kind of give different points of view and different things to try with your kids that maybe you hadn't. So I'm sure this has really helped a lot of the people on here tonight. I know it has me, so I appreciate it.
Well, and there's some additional resources. I don't know if you share that but I can send this to y'all, and y'all are more than welcome to share it out with anybody, because there's a lot of resources I have on here.
Yeah, that would be great.
And I'm just saying, thank y'all for being patient. It's a lot. When I don't have that interaction, it's hard for me to focus and just do this. So if you ever want me to come in person or anything like that, or you have anything, I'm happy to. It's just hard when it's one-sided. I know y'all know that because y'all have done it before.
Yeah.
So you miss a whole bunch of the interaction when you don't see the other side of it.
I get it. Well, you did a fantastic job, and we really appreciate it. And it doesn't look like there's any more questions, so we can probably go ahead and end. But yes, if you could send that to us, that would be fantastic.
Okay, absolutely. I'll do that right now. And then if y'all have any follow-up or anything else, feel free to reach out.
Perfect. All right. Thank you so much for your time, Michelle. We appreciate it.
Thank you,
Bye.
Michelle.
Have a good night.
Thank you, parents, for joining us. We appreciate you.